Hello and welcome to the Bible Difficulties and Answers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Smith, and I am so glad you're here. Each week, we dive into some of the toughest questions in Scripture, uncovering profound truths hidden within its pages. Last Friday, we discussed the meaning of the term Shiloh. Today, we're continuing our study of Genesis 49:10 with a thought-provoking question. If Judah was to reign until the Messiah, why was Israel's first king from the tribe of Benjamin? Have you ever wondered why God allowed Saul to be king first? Did this choice contradict prophecy? And what does it teach us about God's sovereignty and his long-term plan for his people? Honestly, how many people, when they read this one verse, realized it was worthy of 2 podcast episodes to unveil? Let's begin once again by exploring Genesis 49:10 from the New Living Translation. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from his descendants, until the coming of the one to whom it belongs, the one to whom all nations will honor. Okay, as we covered last week, the New Living Translation does not use the word Shiloh in its translation, instead using the phrase, the coming of the one to whom it belongs. This verse is often interpreted as a prophecy that Judah would hold a position of rulership or authority, culminating in the Messiah, often understood as Shiloh or the coming of the one to whom it belongs in this context. So, the question, why Israel's first king, Saul, came from the tribe of Benjamin instead of Judah, is a sharp one. Let's unpack it. We'll begin with the problem as defined by the Big Book of Bible Difficulties. Genesis 49:10 indicates that the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until Shiloh comes. That's the New American Standard Bible translation. But history records that the first king of Israel, Saul, was from the tribe of Benjamin. We read this in Acts 13:21 and 1 Samuel 9:1-2. Now, the solution from the Big Book of Bible Difficulties is this. The problem is predicated on the assumption that Shiloh is a reference to the Messiah. Some scholars take it to refer to the city in Ephraim, where the tabernacle of Moses was erected. On this interpretation, Judah was to be the leader of the 12 tribes all during the wilderness until they came into the Promised Land. Even if Shiloh is a reference to the Messiah, there is no real problem here, since the Messiah came from the tribe of Judah. For this, we need to see Matthew 1, verses 1-3, and also verse 16, as well as Revelation 5:5. In God's eyes, David, from the tribe of Judah, not Saul, was his choice to be the first king of Israel. And again, we'll see 1 Samuel 15-16. So, the tribe of Judah was always the ruling line from which the Messiah was to come. So, let's begin with Saul, from the tribe of Benjamin, who was anointed as Israel's first king around 1050 BC. We find that from 1 Samuel 9:1-2, as well as 10, verse 1. Later, David from Judah became king, that's 2 Samuel 2:4 and 5:3, and established a dynasty that endured for centuries. Genesis 49:10 does not state that Judah would provide every ruler from the beginning, but rather that the scepter, that's symbolizing lasting royal authority, would remain with Judah until the Messiah arrived. The Hebrew phrase, ad ki yavo Shiloh, often translated as until Shiloh comes, implies a process leading to ultimate fulfillment rather than an immediate or continuous rule. As you can see, Saul's kingship doesn't contradict this if you see it as a temporary exception before Judah's line took over. Benjamin was a small tribe, and Saul's rise might reflect practical or divine circumstances. His physical stature and early humility, take a look at 1 Samuel 9:21, made him a candidate when Israel demanded a king. And for that, look at 1 Samuel 8:5. But his reign was flawed and short-lived. And again, go to 1 Samuel 13 and 15, ending with no dynasty. David's reign, however, fulfilled the promise to Judah, and his line endured pointing toward the Messiah in Jewish and Christian traditions. As an example, Matthew 1:1-6 traces Jesus to Judah via David. In fairness, though, some scholars argue that Shiloh isn't the Messiah, but a reference to a place or a cryptic term. Yet the dominant interpretation, especially in later Jewish thought like Targum Onkelos, and Christian theology ties it to messianic rule from Judah. You might have just caught me mentioning Targum Onkelos. So what is that all about? All right, let's break it down for the podcast. It's an old Aramaic translation of the Torah, usually pegged to around the 2nd century AD, though it might have taken its final shape a bit later. This isn't some academic research paper. It's more like a helpful rephrasing, designed to make the Hebrew text clear for Jews who spoke Aramaic after the Babylonian exile. Now, when it comes to Shiloh in Genesis 49:10, Targum Onkelos doesn't dig into it like a detective. It takes a stance. It swaps Shiloh for Messiah, showing that early Jews saw this verse as pointing to a future messianic king from Judah. That's why Saul, being from Benjamin, doesn't throw things off. The prophecy's big picture is about the ultimate ruler, not every king in between. Later thinkers, like the 11th century scholar Rashi, ran with this, saying Shiloh is the Messiah, though some still argue it could have originally meant the town of Shiloh or something else. Either way, Targum Onkelos opens a door to how early Jews understood it, messianic with Judah at the heart. Therefore, Saul's Benjaminite kingship could be a hiccup in that trajectory, not a violation. The prophecy's focus seems to be on the ultimate outcome, Judah's dominance, rather than an unbroken chain from day one. So, short answer, Judah didn't need to supply the first king for Genesis 49:10 to hold. Saul was a provisional figure. The lasting scepter came with David and stayed with Judah, aligning with the prophecy's long arc. We will get more into this when the podcast explores 1 Samuel. But as a quick aside, the reason we're even having this conversation is that Israel demanded a king from God to be like the other nations. In essence, they were rejecting God's direct rule, and God allowed Saul to serve as an object lesson to show the people the consequences of their rejection. So why was Saul then chosen as king? According to the April 11th, 2019 article from Ligonier.org, it appears it was due to Saul's attractiveness. As they detail, 1 Samuel emphasizes Saul's appearance, noting his exceptional handsomeness and height. For that, look at 1 Samuel 9:2. Since Scripture rarely details physical traits, this focus is significant. While other biblical figures like Joseph and David were also mentioned as attractive, their righteousness was more important. In contrast, Saul's greatest commendation was his looks. He fit the image of a king, but lacked the character needed to lead God's people. I will leave it to you to note if any political figures today seem to be chosen based upon their appearance and lack of character rather than their competence. But we still need to drill down further. Why select a king from the tribe of Benjamin and not from Judah? I can think of geographical and political reasons for this choice. Geographically, the tribe of Benjamin was situated in the region of Canaan, between the Jordan River and the cities of Bethel and Jerusalem. Its territory included key locations such as Jericho and parts of the aforementioned Jerusalem. So the tribe of Benjamin occupied a central position between the northern and southern regions of Israel, and east and west as well too. Politically, choosing a Benjamite as the first king may have been a politically neutral choice to unite the tribes. Symbolically, this placement may have made the tribe significant, despite being the smallest. From the Torah Class Presents website, we read this, and I quote, Saul, King Saul now, was from the tribe of Benjamin. This is understandable in the political situation of the day that a man from the tribe of Benjamin was selected to be Israel's first king. Benjamin was in an interesting geographic location. They were a buffer region. Benjamin's southern border bordered on Judah, the leader of the southern faction of tribes, and Benjamin's northern border bordered on Ephraim, the leader of the northern faction of tribes. It put them in both an envious and difficult position. There were loyalties within the clans that formed Benjamin that cut both ways, not unlike the state of Virginia in the American Civil War. At the same time, the territory of Benjamin lay in a militarily and religiously strategic location. Some of Israel's most important and traditionally hallowed sacred sites lay in Benjamin's district. And militarily, Benjamin's territory was along the Jordan River, where some of its best fording points were located. And thus, running through Benjamin was an important highway and trade route. So, we can see God's hand in this. Saul's troubled reign set the stage for David from the tribe of Judah to become king. David's ascension to the throne marked the beginning of the fulfillment of Jacob's prophecy about Judah. So, rather than contradicting Genesis 49:10, Saul's reign was a stepping stone in God's greater plan. His rule exposed Israel's flawed desire for human leadership, paving the way for David and ultimately the Messiah. What does this teach us? That even apparent detours in God's plan serve a purpose. That God's sovereignty is never threatened by human choices, and that no matter how things may seem, His promises stand firm. So what about today? How often do we, like Israel, demand what seems best in the moment rather than trusting in God's perfect plan? Do we too get caught up in appearances rather than character, in immediate solutions rather than long-term faithfulness? As we close, I invite you to reflect on how God's plan is unfolding in your own life. Are you trusting in His timing, or are you demanding a Saul when He has a David waiting? Next week, we wrap up our series in Genesis, 62 episodes in all, with a fascinating discussion on Jacob's prophecy about Issachar. Did Jacob predict slavery for Issachar in Genesis 49, verses 14 to 15? And if so, why did Moses later predict blessing? You won't want to miss it. As always, we love hearing from our listeners. Please join our Bible Difficulties and Answers Facebook page where you can interact with me and other followers of the show. You may also reach us at our website, BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers.podbean.com, or you may reach out to me directly at our email address, BibleDifficultiesAndAnswers@gmail.com, with any questions, comments, concerns, fits of righteous indignation, or just to say hi. I'm always glad to hear from our listeners. Also, please like and subscribe to this podcast, tell a friend or two as well, and also write a review and give it a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast, Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, or any of your venues of choice. It really does help get the word out about the most amazing book ever written. Again, I'm Lance Smith. Until next time, I wish you good luck, good health, and God bless. So long, everybody.